and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an incredible guest, Dr. Heather Kidwell. Dr. Kidwell earned a doctorate in strategic leadership, specializing in burnout. She turned her own corporate burnout into a thriving entrepreneurial career. She helps people transform stress into clarity, resilience, and positive career growth, sharing practical lessons for creating work that is both successful and aligned with their values. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Heather Kidwell.
Thank you.
Heather, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. The topic of burnout. I mean, I just think about people today juggling family, career, like everything. So this is really an important topic of discussion. So, Dr. Kidwell, if you don't mind beginning with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Yeah, so so excited to be here as well. And I just noticed that my lipstick and your sweater, we color coordinated and didn't even mean to. Love it.
I love it.
But yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm a Texas girl, grew up in the military, moving around a lot. So had a lot of restarts, starting over and all that adjustment. A family of divorce. So I've got a little tumbleweed of a situation going on. I've got 5 siblings, and depending on how you slice and dice us, I'm the second, the oldest, the second. Like it gets really confusing. But it keeps it interesting. And our age spans are, my oldest brother is 7 years older than me, and my youngest brother is 17 years younger. So we're like all over the place. So it's such a fun dynamic of that. And then sorry, I have a cat that's chewing on me. I'm talking, here's positivity, little kittens.
We love animals over here.
I love them.
2 dogs.
Oh, yes. The only downside is the kitten was asleep and he's like, oh, are you on the phone? Let's do something.
It's like, have her or him like right there. Like
Yes.
I love animals. So absolutely, whatever's good for you.
Yeah. So
this is absolutely fantastic. Dr. Kidwell, thank you so much for that introduction. And, I really do. I would love to jump right into your career. So before we get into academia and you pursuing a doctorate in strategic leadership, you had a successful career in corporate. I was doing some research before this conversation, 15 years at Wells Fargo Bank, and even more extensive experience too before that as well. So what made you go maybe in this particular direction first before pivoting?
Yeah. So I actually started as like a software development. I was really, I was really sure that I was going to just be the best software developer everywhere, best software developer in the whole wide world. Right. And then I realized I wasn't really that good at it. I got my associate's degree and I was ready to go. And I didn't really enjoy the things that I was good at. And I wasn't good at the parts of development that I wanted to be good at. But then I found that I still knew the language of development. So I went into project management because I was able to talk to the developers and I couldn't do what they were doing, but I understood because I had gone through the schooling. And so there it just kind of grew. I really enjoyed pulling stuff together. I love hosting a good party, and a big project is just a really big party with somebody else is paying for it, which is magical. And so just pulling people together and helping people achieve their goals. And so just kind of pulling some of that stuff in. And then at some point I decided that, I was cool being the project manager, but I really wanted to go into leadership and I really wanted to lead others. Part of that looked like management at first because I assumed that all managers were leaders. And then I quickly learned that there's different types of leadership, right? Either you lead or you're a manager that leads, or you can just be a manager and not a leader. So I had to pick my path there. And then I kind of focused on the manager that was a leader because I thought that I had the most span of control there because I had people that reported to me and they had to listen to me because I was their boss. that was an awakening because they don't have to listen to you just because you're their boss. But I did find that, I did really well. I got to a very senior position in my mid 30s. Most of my peers were 20-ish years older than me. And, they have a leg up on the political savvy and some of that landscape that you learn with time. But, in general, it was a really good role. But then I found that just the management stuff, the actual tactical HR management, performance reviews, all of that stuff, it just kind of got in the way of what I really wanted to do, which was just help people achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. I felt like I had done a lot of cool stuff in my life, and I wanted to help other people do their cool stuff and be kind of a mentor and a friend. And so then that's kind of where I deviated to more of a personal space, because you can't be a manager. I don't want to say can't. You can be a manager and a friend, but it's a little more gray area and constrained. You really have to wear two hats, and that's can be a challenge.
No, absolutely. And, just reflecting upon what you were speaking about with leadership and how you really enjoyed it. You were good at it. With regards to leadership, like what were maybe some lessons that you did learn along the way with maybe your leadership style even changed during your tenure as well? So if you don't mind just elaborating on leadership in general in your role.
Yeah. So leadership, if you had asked me 15 years ago what leadership was getting other people to do things. That was the basic, and that's kind of where I had landed. Over the past 15 years, I've done a lot of schooling and I've learned, and I've also, worked. And I've realized that leadership is not just getting someone to do something. And so then it started to evolve into getting people to want to do something. But then I realized that sometimes people can do things that they don't want to do or necessarily need to do because it's the good for the better, great, the group, it's good for the company, it's good for the common shared goals. And so right now I look at leadership more as getting people to act on a shared vision, a shared outcome, something like that. And kind of the way that shifted was getting people to do stuff kind of turned into telling people to do things in my earlier career. That doesn't go over well. We're all adults, and they were like, who is this little, I'm 4'11", so they're like, who is this little girl that is in here telling me what to do? And does she not realize that blah, 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 so that met with resistance. The getting people to want to do things, actually marriage is probably what shifted that out of me, because I was like, well, I don't want you to take out the trash because I told you to. I want you to want to take out the trash. And my husband's like, nobody ever wants to take out the trash. Like, do you want the trash out or do you not? So then I'm like, okay, so it's not about making someone want, like I can't change their thoughts, but I can ignite action and movement towards something that we've agreed to do. Like we agree that the kitchen needs to be clean. Sometimes that requires you to take out the trash. Sometimes it requires you to do the dishes. So it's kind of shifted and evolved through life choices, or not life choices, but life lessons and work.
I absolutely love that. And I love how you bring in life, like personal life alongside career, and how there's excellent overlap that you were just explaining. And you mentioned, and I really liked it, but when you speak about like just having like a common goal and like a vision, because I think that like helps people see the larger picture of why they do what they do. And I speak about that a lot. I think understanding your why really pulls you through if it's challenges that may arise, any type of issues or like little mini speed bumps, if you will. But the why really does like pull you through. And, Dr. Kidwell, I'm really interested, as you were leading teams, how were you able to kind of like let go and allow them to do their own roles without like the micromanaging? Because micromanaging comes up a lot, it seems like, in leadership, and how some people may need that like, fire lit underneath them, but then other people are like, I know exactly what I'm doing if I could just have my space. So what was your experience like with that?
Oh, that, Gosh, that's probably another tumbleweed of a struggle with myself, struggle with others. But again, since I started from the getting people to do things, and the way you get to being a leader is by doing the things, right? So when you're on your path, you're the expert in what you do. And there's this really fantastic book that kind of shifts it, and it's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And I forget the author's name, so I will make sure to send that. But it's a fantastic book because and I really leaned into, I'm a big self-help read books person, to break that micromanaging, to break the telling people how to do the things. I had to realize that my role wasn't necessarily to do what had gotten me into that leadership role. It was more to create a vision and say, hey guys, we all agree that we need to get here. Yes. And if we didn't even agree on that, talking about all the other stuff really kind of a moot point, because if we're not all sure that we're going to go to the right and half the team wants to go to the left, well, that's a problem, right? So we start there. And then I just really leaned into, my job was to help them do their cool things and help them achieve their really cool things so that I could, as a team, achieve this shared goal that then fit into another shared goal and into another and into another. So that shift of my performance versus helping them just do cool things and helping them feel like they've performed was really what helped me personally. And that's how I coach some of the executives that I've worked with as well. I'm like, okay, well, you're not the software developer. Don't tell them how to write their code. Like, they're good. You don't want your kids telling you how to drive. Don't tell the software developers how to software develop.
No, I absolutely love that because I do. I think it's such an important topic because it really does. I think it could certainly lead to success if you have that certain balance of understanding the individual and what works for them on your team. And it's kind of the same thing as sport, like from a coach's point of view, but like focusing on the individual first, like before the athlete, like what motivates them, what gets
Yeah.
them going. And of course, motivational styles are all different. And so I'm really curious about how you went through your own burnout journey between like corporate and then going back to get your degree, your doctorate in strategic management or strategic leadership, excuse me. So I'm just curious, was it like a one moment type of thing, or was it kind of just over time where it was like, I think I'm ready for something different?
Um, yes and no. So it was a mix of both. I've always been kind of a lifelong learner. I've always been into this $10 course, this $5 course, this free. Like if there was something that I could learn, I really have always enjoyed that. It also helps with the neurospicy mind to not get bored, to have new things going in, and something new and exciting. So from that perspective, it's always kind of fit. After I got my MBA at UNC Charlotte, I was like, okay, I'm never going back to school again. I worked while I did that. I was like, this was miserable. This was terrible. Who does this? But I learned that the MBA is a great degree. It's a master's in business administration, but it's very tactical on business and running a business. And that's what at the time I thought I was doing. And then fast forward 4 or 5 years after that is when I landed that really senior role. And I was playing and in the room with executives and just having these really great conversations that I was like, yes, this is what I made it. I have made it right now. I've made it early. This is awesome. And then I just started to disassociate with it. I wasn't enjoying it. I don't like the politicking that you have to do at the upper levels. I felt so disconnected from people, and like people became resources and budget lines and these things, and I really struggled with that. And I even got to the point where if people would call humans resources, I'm like, they're not pencils, they're people. And people were like, whoa, Heather, whoa, okay, calm down. And I definitely got a couple like, whoa, okay, we've heard you say that before, like, let's step off that. But I knew that something was off. And then I stuck around in that role and I kept going until I hit to the point where I was just struggle bus city. I was in the kitchen one day and I was making sandwiches for my husband and I had a tomato in my hand and I'm holding it and I'm like, "Do you want any apple on your sandwich?" And he was like, "Ew, what?" And I was like, "No, no, ball." And I could say every red and every round thing. I couldn't get the word tomato out of my mouth to save my life. And I was like, "This, do you want this thing on your sandwich?" And he was like, "I don't know. Do I?" Just like, whatever you want to do. So I was like, "Yes, you want it." He's like, "Yes, yes, I would love some tomatoes." So, and in that moment, I actually thought I had early onset dementia. I was 36 at the time. I went and I got a brain scan. I went into all these things and I did dementia testing and I did all this testing. And they're like, "Yeah, you're just really stressed." And I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me? And they're like, "Yeah, you're just really stressed." So I was like, "Okay, well, I'm just really stressed. So I need to be better at managing this stress because clearly I'm not good at managing stress." And so I stayed in that role for maybe another 6 months after that, just trying so hard to make it work because I really wanted everyone to be proud of me. And then the moment that it clicked that that wasn't right and that something else needed to happen was I realized it was that I was making everyone else proud and I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to do. And that's why it disconnected. So I moved into an individual contributor role, a very senior level one, which I didn't even realize that they were out there, but a really senior one that was kind of in the space that I wanted to do. And then I kind of healed for a year. It was the only time I got a does not meet on my performance review. I was broken. I really was. But the manager was great, like really gracious, just kind of took me in, let my wings heal. And it was like, "Be free, little bird." And then somewhere in the process of that, I started exploring school. And I got accepted to UNC Charlotte in a doctorate in business administration because I was like, well, clearly I'm not good at business. And that's what the problem is, business. And I'm a big believer that the universe, however you label that, kind of drives you where you need to go. Several things with that program didn't work out. It didn't fit. And so I actually declined to join that program. And then in 2019, I saw this semi-virtual program at Liberty University. And I was like, "Ooh, strategic leadership." And I was like, "Oh, I can dig into leadership. And there's a whole degree I can dig into this." And it worked out. And honestly, we all remember 2020. So it worked out that I was in a virtual program. So it just kind of really fit. And then from there, it just flourished from there.
That's incredible because I love to always hear how people do get into these degree programs because sometimes, it could be simply a conversation. Maybe somebody sees potential to go in a certain direction or it's passion, just like you were saying. I mean, you really enjoyed leadership and to be able like for this to kind of like fall into your lap, I think is so exciting. So when you were in this degree program, what was maybe enjoyable about it? Obviously, a doctorate, very challenging, but at the same time, like, what was able for you to reflect and say, wow, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be?
Probably the dissertation process, which is actually the part that most people quit on if they are. I think it's like 70 something percent of people don't do that because it sucks. If you're going through school, you pick something that you're really passionate about because it's rough. But I realized through that, I started with women in transition, women's transition, life transitions, very ambiguous. I didn't even know what burnout was at this point. Like I knew the word that people are like, "Oh, I'm so burned out today." And I'm like, "Oh, it just means you're really stressed, whatever." And then through writing my problem statement, I realized that what I had gone through was burnout. And it's a deep psychological phenomenon. You can't just be burned out today and then you're fixed tomorrow. It's deep. And so the reparenting myself or healing of myself through that, I think I got goosebumps, just the really beautiful thing because I learned what I had gone through. I learned the language to describe it. And I felt less alone because all those years that I was really sitting in it and healing, I just felt alone and kind of broken. And I was like, no, this is big. The World Health Organization calls this a phenomenon tied to roles and stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, this is a thing. So I think that's probably the biggest beautiful piece. And then I was like, oh, I don't ever want anyone to feel alone during this. So then that's kind of where that spark for the company came up, was after I healed myself, then I kind of looked outward.
Wow. I think like as you are able to reflect upon sometimes why we go through these like difficult times, at the same time, I can't remember exactly like the exact quote, but I know Steve Jobs had mentioned, when you look back at your career, you could basically like only understand it like connecting the dots looking back.
Mhm.
And we do, I think sometimes we're in these storms and we're like, oh my goodness, like when is this going to be over? But at the same time, I think it's a beautiful thing to remember that like good times as well as bad times are temporary.
Yep.
And at the same time, you go through sometimes these difficult or challenging times to maybe on the other side be able to help others because you literally lived it and you know what it's like. And so you were mentioning it just at the end, but when was that particular moment? Were you about to finish the doctorate program and you're like, I just know I'm going to start my business? Like when was that?
Yeah. So it, it's interesting when that entrepreneur bug bites you, it just bites you. And before that, it's non-existent. I finished my doctorate and I was like, I'm going to be the best leadership executive coach. I might move into HR, but it was all very corporate focused. And then I did a couple of women's retreats. I did one with a couple of friends of mine, and then I did one on my own. And just those moments, and when someone like walks away just holding their chest and they're just like, this changed my life. And I lost it in the hallway in a beach condo. I was just like, oh my God. And then they started crying and I started crying and then we cried more. And then I'm tearing up a little bit thinking about it, but it was just such a meaningful moment. And I've had some of those in my corporate space, but never quite a whole time to just sit and dedicate to that. So that kind of started, and the bug kind of was like, it was close. I could hear it, and I was like, there's something floating around here. And then when I realized that part of what was kind of holding me in the space that I was that I'm a very science, very clinical, very Western modality kind of person, military kid. I mean, that's just how I was raised. And I realized that I found a lot of comfort in things like yoga, in breathing, and some of these other things that were a little more Eastern modality. And I was like, I don't know about that. And some of them I felt bad. I was like, oh, I don't know. What will my mom say if she knows that I'm like going to a Reiki class? I don't know. Like, will they approve of this? I don't know. And so then when the bug bit was, I was like, you know what? I can help people not only get through that burnout, but then they can find that sustainable pace to go forward. And there's this whole other half of the world that, or if you're in that super crunchy woo, whatever you want to call it, Eastern, if you're super in that space, there's a whole lot of clinical grounded scientific stuff that maybe can balance. And I'm like, man, we're so one or the other. In the middle, or setting your own dial, is really where that magic sauce is, if you will. And I was like, that's it. That's my mission, is to help people find the sustainability in a space that balances both of those in whatever way fits for them. No shame, no judgment on if you're more on one side than the other, or if we're both in the same space but it looks different. Like meditation looks very, very different for me than it does for probably most people that meditate. I'm an eyes open, a fidget. It's very active. So it's not like what you're going to see on TV or in the meditation 101 class, but it's amazing, right? So finding that, and then that's between the retreats and that realization, I was like, all right, I'm in. And then the nudge, the big nudge, was corporate downsizing. You mentioned earlier, they were downsizing at my organization, in my department. So I was like, okay, well, this is happening. It's game on.
Always love to hear the journey into entrepreneurship because I think it's fascinating. Like you said, like when you really get that bug, there's nothing like it. You're going all in. And
Mm.
especially like you just said, if it's a corporate downsize, you're like, okay, this is all game. Like we are
Yep.
going straight into this. And I think that's incredible because you've been so successful in this. And so I would love for you just to speak about like what was it like when you had that like first client and you were able to kind of draw from that lived experience that you have shared and be able now to help others. And you had even mentioned it in the conversation, but how you really wanted to like be able to pull people's human potential, their full human potential, especially in a leadership position out. So, like, what was that all like, that first client?
Yeah. The first word that pops into mind is nervous. I'm like, okay, this person needs help. And what if I just make it worse? So all of those normal self doubt, make sure you're doing that. But honestly, working through the process I almost felt like I was going through it with them because I've been there. And even though I say I've healed, I still have residual things from my childhood, something from like 6, 7 years ago. It's still there. And so being able to kind of go through that, hear things from their perspective, and I'm like, ooh, yes, I did that too. And so we can kind of converse together, obviously focusing on them and their needs. But it was beautiful because I learned from them. So it was a bi-directional kind of learning. And then when they came out of it and had, I don't want to say fixed because it's not something you fix, right? But they had a plan of these tiny things that they were going to be able to try. And they had a plan to reassess, dig back in, decide if those things worked or not, keep them, drop them, give themselves permission to kind of trial and play. It was deeply meaningful. And then I worked with her for probably 7 or 8 months. And by the person that day one and the person at the end just felt lighter, was smiling, making jokes. Like even the conversation with her it was just different. It was like almost, I don't want to say a different person, but a different part of her that had been stifled down by just all of this pressure on top of her, and having her light shine through was just gorgeous.
I love to hear that because I feel like today, especially for ambitious professionals, being able to juggle everything, it really can begin to weigh you down. And I
Mm-hmm.
speak about this a lot on the podcast of the terminology of like work-life balance, but
Mm.
I like to call it like work-life harmony almost.
Yes.
And so that is my question for you is how if there's listeners out there that are like highly ambitious professionals, what could you advise them when it comes to balancing life, like personal life as well as their career, and to be able to flourish?
Yeah, so I too have redubbed it. And actually somebody said this to me in my dissertation, and I told him, I'm shamelessly going to borrow this for the rest of my life. It's a life forward work balance. So life comes first. And I think one of the things, and this is somewhere in the millennial generation, it's kind of shifted, but most of the generations before millennials lived to work in a lot of ways. It was what we did, it's what we had to do, whether your job was being in the business or being at home or raising the kids or whatever it was your job and you stayed in your lane. And somewhere in that millennial space, and I'll say like my younger brothers are, it's funny, I'm an old millennial and they're a young millennial. So we're in the same space, but their version of it's very different. They're very kind of like, I mean, maybe I'll just take a gap year. Maybe I'll do that, but it's all about what they want. They don't take a job just because it's got all the bells and the whistles. They're like, yeah, like my brother got out of school, worked at Chick-fil-A for years. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'll just do this. And now he's in a leadership program and he's doing all kinds of really cool things that I didn't even know Chick-fil-A offered. But because he just kind of was like, yeah, no, I've got this degree. I'm going to go over here. And that authenticity has really been good for him. So I think for ambitious people, it's remember that life is first, because that's what we're doing, and work is an accessory to life. It's not all of your life. And when you say yes to one, you're saying no to the other in some ways, unless you happen to have, like, if you're a vlogger that goes on vacation and you make money somehow doing that, then you can do life and work at the same time. Fantastic. I'm jealous. But, for most of us, those sit down work moments, you are saying no to hanging out with a friend or doing something. Like, there's always something in there. And with ambitious people, it's not motivation, it's the boundaries that are the problem. So you're motivated to do all the things, but you need the boundary to pull back and be like, but is this the right thing aligned to me? Because it really, all of the choices should be aligned to you and where you're going in life and what your values are, your expectations, not necessarily everything swirling around you.
No, absolutely. And, as you were speaking about like different generations, I am fascinated right now with how many generations are in the workforce
Mm-hmm.
and how, like you said, like different perspectives, different values. And so, my question with like strategic leadership, whether it is focusing in on corporations, but to have that effective leadership and to be able to have those common like mission values and to have the discipline to work hard in order to see the fruits of your labor obviously differs from generation to generation, just as you mentioned, like um, different personality types view career completely different now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what is your advice, even with younger generations like Gen Z entering the workforce as well? Like, how do you pull everybody together to be on, the same like train, so to speak, to be able to move forward and to succeed?
I think the first thing is it starts with humanity. They're all humans. Everyone's at work to pay a bill, accomplish something. Like, they're all there because they are trying to do something. So remembering that there's a need. And for some, it might be, I'm at the end of my career and I'm just trying to stay busy so that my mind is active. So their drive is going to look a lot different than I'm 25 and I'm building a career and I'm willing to put it all in there because I don't have kids yet. I don't have this yet. And so I'm going to all out so I can build this. So just remembering that everyone's there, maybe for a different thing, and then taking a moment to connect with the people and figure out what is their motivator, and balancing all of that. And if we can figure out, okay, yes, we're all motivated by different things, but at the end of the day, are we trying to all make sure that the kitchen is clean? Yeah. Do we all agree the kitchen can be clean? Okay, cool. If we can agree on that, then whatever reason you happen to be standing in the kitchen, if it's to get a snack or get a water or whatever, you can do that and still support the common goal. So I always encourage leaders, especially, well, all leaders, but really those executive leaders, is to honor the uniqueness that comes with people, because that's what makes them want to be there, is when you see them as humans, not as a budget line, as a resource, as a thing, because we're all people and there's so much complexity. Not that, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Like, we have to do our taxes every year. I don't really get a choice about that because I'm human. But we have a whole range of time to do that. There's different ways to do it. You can do it yourself on TurboTax. You can hire someone. Like, there's different ways to accomplish that based on what your goals are and why you're doing it.
I absolutely love that. And I love the fact, like you said, like just focusing on the human being first and what really is their motives, their intent, as to why they are in that position and where they are at in life and how that matches up maybe to the career goals like on that particular team. And so we spoke about it already, but with burnout, that's a topic of discussion today that is very widespread, very much spoken about. And so, like, what maybe is some advice when it comes to if an individual who's listening in is experiencing burnout? Is there any type of like strategies, or is there a program that you utilize that you can maybe just give them like tips or so forth?
Yeah. So I would say the first biggest tip that I wish somebody had told me is don't sit in it alone. ask for help. If you need help, ask for help. And if you're in burnout, you probably need help, support, whether that's a circle of girlfriends, guy friends, family friends, therapy, whatever that help means. That's a big umbrella. Just be vulnerable and ask for the help, or at least tell someone that you're going through it. Because I tried to own it and go through it myself, and I think I made it worse. And based on my research, I'm very certain that I made it worse. But I'm strong and independent, and I'm a boss girl, and I can do all the things. So, yeah, but that's my first thing.
No, I love this. And I do. I feel like even having time to reflect. And the reason I bring this up is when I was doing research for this conversation, Dr. Kidwell, you have incredible credentials. And these are just like a couple of awards that you have received, but you were named one of the 50 most influential women in Charlotte by the Mecklenburg Times, and you also received nominations for the Athena International Leadership Award and Girls on the Run Coach of the Year. But on your website, you were just talking about how you had all of these accolades, all of these awards, but there was something that just didn't felt right. Like, how could you maybe elaborate on that? Because there may be people that are listening and like, yeah, I know exactly what she's feeling.
Yeah. So the awards, amazing. I got to bring my parents to like awards dinners and stuff. I'm just, oh, look how, my dad's so proud of me. And with my job and everything, granted, I did enjoy the work I was doing and I enjoyed it. So I don't want it to sound like I was strong armed into my career. But there were a lot of times that I would be in front of hundreds of people doing a presentation or talking about something at a town hall. And I just felt, I want to say like empty and alone. I like room full of people, and I'm a really big extrovert. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to go into the room, say my things, and leave and hide from people. So I felt alone, but I wanted to be extra alone because I felt so alone. And I felt just like my bones didn't fit for me, if that makes sense. Like I was this one person, but I was in happy extrovert Heather's body, and they didn't really fit. So that's kind of the thing that was off. And I think it's because I really didn't have the language to explain what I was going through. So I really didn't know, because a lot of people, especially, children and military families and stuff, I think we're kind of taught to like leave the room, have your feelings. When you're ready to rejoin the family, come back. And so I was hiding my feelings because I think that's what you do. But then it was just making me feel more alone. And then I started to get really snippy and like just really frustrated. And people were like, "Oh, something's wrong with Heather today." And that was when I knew that it was really, really bad, when people were like, "Oh," like I wasn't keeping it together anymore. So that's kind of the space that I was describing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you so much for just sharing your journey, because I really do. I feel like today, especially, we could always see the highlights, as we all know, like the awards, like on LinkedIn and everything, but being able to really walk people through that journey, because to get to certain points, just like you were saying, I mean, you've achieved all of these awards, and on the outside it looks fantastic, but
Yes.
maybe on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something really, I think, important to speak about, because we sometimes think it's so like easy to get there, but behind the scenes, number one, it could be a lot of work, but then number two, maybe you're feeling pulled to maybe go in a different direction, and it's hard to maybe speak up and to tell people. But just like you said, to be able to have that strength and to reach out to ask for help sometimes, to make that pivot, if you will. And so my next question is like more into leadership, but of course, especially in corporate environments, it's very much like results driven. And so for a leader to be able to have that success, but then alongside of it, to build that lasting legacy, like how would you advise to be able to kind of pull together both and to have that success as a leader?
Yeah. So, performative success and legacy to me, very different things. I would wager that no one remembers a lot of the things that I accomplished as their manager, as their leader. Probably the really big things, maybe just because it was a big transformation and a big change. But I feel like legacy is that thing that lives on. And delivering a project at a time, cool, you did that, but that memory fades because there's another project, there's another project, there's another project. Standing in the hallway crying with somebody because they said I changed their life, that's like a core memory. That's a forever memory. And I think that's legacy to me. And, remembering that, the current CEO of Bank of America, for example, he's been there for a while, which is rare for bank executives, but he was really big on, we don't lay people off. We don't we value our full-time employees. We have contractors that can come and go for a reason. And he really focused on that. And I think that I don't know much about what he's accomplished because I don't work there, but I do know, even not working there, I know that he values some of these things and that that's part of what he looks for. So I think that's the legacy. And when you think about like Steve Jobs and some of the other big people, you do think about some of the performative things, but really what you think about is the human. So my big advice to people is if you just want to be a tactical manager and leader, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of us don't necessarily want to have a big legacy, but if legacy is really what you're going for, it has, again, I can say this all day. I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's going to start with humanity. I mean, that's the whole, my company, humanity driven leadership. It all starts with humans because that's what you're working with. And so when you create that legacy, it has to be those forever memories, those core things. And that's bigger than a bread box. That's not like a delivering here and there. There's a lot more to that.
That's so true. And, as you bring up humanity driven leadership, I am so curious as we move forward into this like technology heavily driven era, if you will. It's already been here, as we know, but it really is its full force. So what is your thoughts on how like humanity driven leadership is really going to play such an impactful role moving forward alongside of technology for teams and for leadership?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think that so it all starts with themselves, right? So you reconnect with yourself, find that balance, like I talked about, and you kind of know who you are. Then walking alongside of that is technology. Technology is a tool that helps us. It's not a thing. It's probably, I don't think we're going the Skynet, Terminator realm where they're just going to completely take over the world. But like I have a floor robot that I push a button and it sweeps the floor. Fantastic. I see it as a tool, and especially with AI. And this is something that I always tell people is, AI is something that maybe can get you like 50, 60% of the way there, but you can always tell the language stuff. It ruined the M dash, it ruined emojis, like, so it's doing, like, you can tell when something is very AI versus when there's that human element. So, maybe I write a blog post, I might verbal it into AI and get it to spit out what it thinks it is. But then really what makes that blog post or that Substack article really hit is that I then go through it and I'm adding in the humanity back in, because a computer's never going to truly understand emotion and living in our bodies and scratching your hand and how bad it hurts and typing with a paper cut on your finger because that's the worst thing in the world. There's just no way to really it can describe that, but it's just always going to be a little dry. So I think technology is definitely a great tool. And in a lot of ways, I hope it makes life easier and can take away some of the little pieces that are just like, I hate sweeping the floor. So I have a little robot that does it. That helps me be a little less stressful because I have a bad attitude every time I have to sweep the floor. And I don't know why. I just do. I'm just like, stupid broom. The broom has done nothing wrong. In fact, it does everything right. But that's one little way that technology has helped me kind of clear out some of the clutter. So, when people are looking at ways to be less stressed or have less in their space, well, maybe there's a technology solution, there's virtual assistants, there's all kinds of stuff that maybe can take some of that out so you can focus on those deeply meaningful things that really enrich you and bring you the joy, and let the mechanical broom do the brooming.
No, absolutely. I literally, I was kind of chuckling as you were speaking because like what like sweeping is to you, for me, it's laundry. If there was something that could help me with laundry, oh my goodness, Heather, my life would just be like gold. It would be gold.
Yes.
But I really am. I'm just so curious. Like before we round out this podcast episode, incredible podcast episode, you spoke so much about humanity driven leadership. And I think that's going to be so important moving forward. But perhaps like what is the broader vision for that leadership culture that you really do focus on with your coaching?
Yeah. So the broader vision is to lead from the core of yourself, to really truly take the time to get to know yourself. I just met me truly probably 3 or 4 years ago. I've met me in layers, but like sit down with yourself and get to know yourself and really honor if what everyone says is made it isn't what feels like you've made it, then figure out what that is and pursue it and be passionate about it, or find ways to volunteer in that so that you're folding it in. Maybe you don't have the option to leave whatever work you're in because you need an income, you need the health insurance, whatever. There's all kinds of volunteer things that you can do. There's ways that you can spend your time, personal time, to kind of fill that cup. But whatever that is, I just want people to bring that in so that they have it, so that they can really truly shine as themselves and not as what they think, how they think they should shine.
That's so true because I feel like today, a lot of people go into specific things like because society tells you that if you get this, particular major, you have to do XYZ, or, you've climbed the ladder this far, the corporate ladder, you have to keep going. And so I love how you mention that because I believe when you take time and you're one with yourself and you're able to like map out even like your values, like what do you stand for? What really rings loud to you, like internally, like what excites you, what wakes you up in the morning, every day with a sense of excitement and joy. And you mentioned, I think the practicality of that, because it's one thing like to be able to dream about that, but sometimes there's a reality where there needs to maybe be that full-time job, but being able to do that perhaps on the side or during weekends or so forth, that really allows the individual to like come into their like true selves. It's beautiful
Yeah.
to watch that. It really is. And 100%, like when you were talking about like being able to see somebody shine that way, it is real. Like you could see when somebody's living out whatever they desire to do, like that passion, that sense of purpose in life. It is so, you could just tell. I don't know. You
Yeah.
could just really tell about it.
It's
But
palpable. Like you can feel it, you can see it, you can feel the energy buzz off of like, oh yes, this person is thriving.
that's what it is, Heather. It's the energy. I'm all about the energy, okay, I don't know this kind of stuff. I don't want to get too much into it, but like frequency, like when somebody's on the right frequency, you're
Yeah.
vibing with them. You're like, yes.
Yes.
But it's so true. But Heather, I would love for you to round out this amazing podcast episode with either a positive message or a positive quote for our community.
Yes. So I knew you were going to ask for a quote, so I did some soul searching. So Miss Dolly Parton is one of the most positive people that I think I know. But not, I don't personally know her, know of. And she said, the way I see it, if you want a rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. And I like that because it honors effort and challenge, but it doesn't overly glamorize suffering. It just calls out that rain's part of the process, but it's not the identity of what you're going for. And, stress is kind of information, but that rain, maybe it's getting you to that rainbow.
Absolutely love that, because to your point, like, once again, it's hitting the reality of life, that acknowledging, yes, unfortunately life will present sometimes storms, but being able to maybe look at it through a positive lens to say, you know what, how did I grow through that process? And I think reflection is really powerful, or can be powerful in one's journey. So Heather, I love that quote. I just love it. And she does. She makes me just smile like every time I hear her name. Absolutely. But Heather, thank you so much for coming onto this podcast, sharing your passion and your joy for humanity-driven leadership. That is the way forward. There's no doubt about it. So Dr. Kidwell, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I just really appreciate it. I love the positivity that you're putting out into the world. We need more of this.